This is the second part of the organizational management lectures. This week, we're going to be going over the planning process, evaluations and assessments, and then how evaluations work and why you should be using them. Since I'm all about kind of the concrete in this class, I'm going to try to give you some ways that you can align your program with the visions and the mission statements that you have for your program. I'm really a firm believer in writing out your policies, procedures, and rules. I think the actual process of writing is very helpful, and that's why I try to give you guys feedback every week on your weekly assignments, specific edits, and then just things that you might want to think about or work through so that you know yourself what you're trying to communicate to your staff. A lot of times our policies are going to be fairly philosophical. I mean, what do we think about education? How should children be treated? Those are really big ideas and really big topics. And so having an idea of what you think about them and taking time to write them and taking time in a class where you kind of have somebody who's done it before give you some feedback, I hope is really helpful. And then taking kind of the big ideas from the policy and making it into a procedure, and then even smaller minutia of the rule will hopefully support the program so that the staff knows what to do and make you into an effective communicator. I do think that evaluations and then assessments for staff and with staff really support the policies and goals. We want to have a workforce, we want to have teachers that know our policies, know our procedures, know children, so that we don't have to spend so much of our time working and training with them. And then a planning process, because I know that our days get crazy and working with children, no day is the same, and there's a lot of variety and a lot of variables. So hopefully have some order or have some long-term thinking about what's going on in your program. So the planning process really comes with what kind of the textbook was talking about a mental image of what you want to accomplish. So your plan is kind of based off of the mission statement. So if you took 150 with me, you write a mission statement for your program. And then in this class, you write a mission statement for yourself professionally, how you want to be a leader. If you haven't taken time and you are wanting to become a director, you are a director and you don't have a mission statement, then I would really challenge you to write one. It's less than a paragraph. It's usually 2 to 3 sentences about what you think about education. How do you want children to learn in your program? Because really planning is based on that goal. That mental image of what's going to happen is, in business speak, business talk, called your central concept. And so you're taking that central concept and you're doing strategic planning, which is really taking that concept, that mission statement, and putting it into really broad practice. And then it's typically reviewed or honed formally every 3 years. So my mother retired a year ago. She worked at a water district. She was a general manager, or she's assistant general manager. And before she retired, her project was to do strategic planning. As she was kind of leaving this position and she was giving her role onto somebody else, and now we're kind of in a post-Flint world as well. Water quality and water for people means more than it did when she started her career. So she was going through the strategic planning with her board in order to interpret their central concept and make plan for a year, plan for 5 years actually. And then also their mental image was that water quality is deeply important to everybody. Water is the basics of life. You have to have it. And so how were they going to make sure that they have quality water for everybody? So they were going to have to put money into infrastructure and pipes and quality testing and things like that. So that's how they were kind of doing their strategic planning. It was quite broad. It's not like the pipes on 75th Street will be, redone by 2020. It was broad practice. Water quality is important. Our water quality things are going to be changed. This is how we're going to change that. So it was broad. And then operational planning. So we're looking at organizational management, and that goes a lot into operational as well. So the specific plans that you've put in place to support your vision. So how are you involving staff? And then for us, regulations. It's all about if we're state funded, are we federal funded? What does community care licensing think about this? How many kids can we have in a classroom? What are our DPs need to go to? So our operational planning takes our mission statement, but it puts us in the real world, and for childcare, it puts us within a regulatory body that has very specific guidelines on how we work with children. So our planning framework is daily, weekly, yearly, educational framework, goal planning framework, and then program planning as well. So there's a lot of different program planning that you can go into. We all run different programs. Some of you are FCC, some of you are large programs with 100 kids, some of you have 50 kids, some of you are church preschools, some of you are Head Starts. We all are really doing different things. So different programs are going to have different goals and different implementation, and it's really going to vary. So this is very generalized so that most of you will start to understand what I'm talking about. Because of that, because of the difference of our program, some of you are going to have goals set for you. So if you are corporate or you are very much bound into the regulatory body that you work for, you're going to have standards. You are going to have your own goal. Even if corporate in New York City or Washington or something like that is telling you to use the creative curriculum and blah, 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 and what days your workshops are on and stuff like that, you still know your community, you know your staff, and you need to know what kind of goals you have. Is there a specific area of the creative curriculum that you need to work on? Then that's going to be your specific goal outside of kind of this realm. So same with regulations. Community care tells us how we are supposed to keep children healthy and safe. We need to look at our goals to implement that. Is there are certain parts, our ratios and supervision, fantastic, but our food service is really lousy. Then our food service is going to be our goal. So it's really kind of this idea of who you are as a director and a leader, and where do you want to go? Where do you want to take your program? I really am a big believer in yearly planning. It can be informal or it can be more established and prescribed. I'm typically more for the established and prescribed. You have a general idea of what you're going to be doing monthly in order to get you towards these goals. That doesn't mean that it's going to change. It doesn't mean that June goes haywire and you don't get anything done. You know, you're going to push it to July. You have a general idea of each month. I like that because families, we like to plan our family events well. In advance, and especially for closures, communicating that and communicating as much as possible is really helpful. You know, I'm somebody who I know what my summer and fall semester are going to look like because of how I teach, and so I have already done summer camps and I've already done all of these things 5-6 months in advance, and so I like to know when my elementary school is going to close so that I can make plans like that because I have to arrange babysitters. Staff is really important as well because you're just guiding on topics, staff needs, training, orientation. So allowing them to be part of the process, you're going to want to do that sooner rather than later because you can't ask them the morning of a staff meeting what you want to talk about. You're not going to have enough time to do that. So knowing a little bit in advance by doing staff assessments or questionnaires, asking them what are your interests, what are your goals, what do you want to learn about, will inform the year and how you are going to work with them. And then financial is bolded because we will get more into this. We'll do 2 weeks of financial because you're going to compare your annual budget, kind of your forecast of what money you're bringing in and what money is going out with yearly planning. And I'm going to go more into that with this. So this is from my 150 class, but I've brought it over because I think it's very applicable to both classes. So this is an example of yearly planning, and this is how I would do it, bullet points of things that I wanted to do within an established program. So I have my teams are working fairly well. We might have new people, but I have seasoned professional people that have been with me for a while. You know, we're just kind of rolling along. But I still have goals that I want to work. So there's nothing super pressing. There's no emergency. Licensing came. We did really good on our annual visit. You know, that type of stuff. But we still have goals that we're working for. When I'm talking about the annual budget, that's typically done in January. It doesn't matter. It's 12 months. You can start in June. You can start in August. It doesn't matter when you start. Most places start in January. It's a new year. So your annual budget is finalized, you sit down with administrators, you plan vacation, stuff like that. Then, like, let's say in April, you're paying a liability and insurance this month, so you have no extra money for supplies. And that's why the financial can be really important. And even if you are not writing the checks, let's say it's Head Start or something like that, you still have money, you still have financial constraints that you probably work with. So if your program is paying for liability insurance this month and you have no extra money for supplies, you want to tell your staff in February. Like, hey, all of your Reggio project stuff is fantastic, but April you get nothing. So if you need something, we need to buy it now. We need to be conscious of what we're spending right now so we can get through this liability that I need to pay. Then in June, your center is going to be painted out inside. So you're preparing for a long week outside. So you're preparing for a long week of the kids inside. June is the worst month. You're probably going to spend out more on getting new activities or new games or, you know, somebody to come in and make bubble animals or balloon animals or something like that in order to keep these kids that are going to be inside for a long time happy. And then in July, maybe you'll talk to your staff and you're going to have an HR consultant because health insurance is going to be changing, and vacation and sick time are also going to be changing. So you'll have your HR consultant come in and you'll have a staff meeting to discuss these changes before they actually go into effect. Then in September, you have an open house for your school, back to school night. So you're going to order refreshments. You need to print handouts. That's an extra fee. But in August, you had registration fees that the parents should have already paid in order to cover some of those costs. And then in December, let's say I'm closed for a week, then I'm also going to pay out to have my shampoo, my carpet shampooed, my windows washed professionally, the center of pressure washed, something like that. So I'm combining my staff, I'm combining families and family events like back to school night, and I'm also doing financial, like when I have money, when I don't have money. And even if you are, like I said, getting money, like from eligibility, and you have a fairly steady stream, you still always need to be conscious of what your annual budget is talking about. And we will talk more because we have 2 weeks to kind of go over financial. Then there's yearly planning, and I call this back to basics. So maybe you're a new group, a storming group, a forming group, something like that, or you've been hit on licensing and you have some, you know, kind of basic health, safety, education issues, or you've just started your program. This is probably how you might want to go along it, and an example of how you can use yearly planning to hit the really big things that we talk about in child welfare. So January, so you're having monthly staffing meetings. Some people don't. I had mine quarterly. I had them every other month. I didn't typically do them every month, but it really depends. And if you are having problems with licensing, you're probably going to have to do that every month, which is another financial cost as well, as that's overtime for most people that you're paying, or comp time, or, you know, some kind of time that you're paying them to attend this. So monthly staff meetings, supervision, and ratios. February is ECHRs. So what are ECHRs? How do we use ECHRs? Then they are doing ECHRs in the classroom. Then in April, we're going over the results of ECHRs, and the most important thing, doing the plan of action together. What were the deficiencies in the classroom? How can we come around, and how can we make good decisions about making this better? What do I need to order? What do you need to do? What do you need to change with your training practices? And how can I support you management-wise in order to make those changes? Then May, family style dining and hand washing. This is all things that teachers need to know, but if you are having issues with it, reminding them in those staff workshops that you've thought about, that you've brought materials for, that you've supported with additional readings and resources, so that if family style dining and hand washing is reinforced with them so they will do it. Then in June, we have a longer staff meeting, maybe on a Saturday, and we do CPR. In July, we do first aid. So that everybody's done it. We are all there. August, we've worked hard all year. Let's have some fun. Let's relax together. Let's build our team. Let's eat some food, jump in the pool, have fun, work on that team building. September, we're going to do lesson planning. October is customer service and working with different families. And then December, closed for 1 week. And then typically, if I was back to basics, we were struggling, I would have my carpet cleaning, of course, and whatever things I could pay for professionally. But then I would also always pay people 1 or 2 days to come into the classroom, organize, declutter, things like that. So we start January as good as possible, especially for back to basics, hitting all of those areas, so our environments are spotless and ready to go. So we've done our yearly planning. We've made a plan of kind of each month goals that we want to work, little achievable things that we can do. And train staff and work with staff in order to get to our goals. Can you and should you involve staff in planning? I think you should. I think first you need to identify the areas where you actually want their input. If it's regulatory, if it's things that your hands are tied on, then don't ask the staff. It's not going to be anybody's choice. They shouldn't be involved in it. But there might be areas that they can, like professional development or ECHRs, are definitely things where you want to involve staff in your planning process. And you can do this by questionnaire before you start your year, so in December or whatever, the month 2 or 3 months out before your planning goes into effect, sending out a questionnaire by Google Documents or even something that they can write, getting a sense of how many people want to learn about this, how many people want to learn about that. What are the areas of concern in your classroom? What do you want to know more about? What would you like to read about? That can inform how you plan your staff meetings and how you plan your year. Also, as a director, you don't want to take on everything all the time on yourself, so it will identify areas where you can delegate to an experienced teacher, a new gung-ho teacher, a mentor teacher. So there are areas in planning, if they know more about Reggio than you do, because they just graduated from college and they did their doctoral thesis on it, then, you know, involve them in your staff workshop. You know, learn from the experts that you have on hand. And once again, I talked about this, I think 3 weeks ago, but the more you're involved in your workplace, you have a better understanding of your policies and program. And so that is going to be reflected in the work that we do with children and with families. And then change from the bottom up really can be better for functioning. You know, a lot of times people would be like, oh, what do you think about this? And it's your classroom. Like, you know, if changing a small procedure or a small rule is going to make your lives with the children and the families easier, and it doesn't go against our fundamental vision for the center, and it doesn't go against regulations, then fantastic. Thanks for running it past me, but go for it. Like, it's your classroom. I want it to run smooth. I do want to jump into the idea of assessment and evaluation because I was talking about that earlier, where you send questionnaires out to involve your staff. And part of that, I think, is kind of this assessment process. But also if things come back as lacking. So I was talking about kind of that back to basics. If licensing hits you, or if your ECRS comes back as lacking in a few areas or having deficiencies or anything like that, that's going to affect management, your policies, your budgeting, what you need to spend money on, and then your curriculum planning as well. So assessing and evaluating your program and assessing and evaluating your staff is a good opportunity to make quality changes to get you towards what you need to be doing. So assessment and evaluations are different things, but they're used really interchangeably. So assessment is more like it's a way to look at basic competencies and performance, and then evaluation is really kind of gauging fit between goals and practice. But in evaluations, it's typically more the same for all employees. So I'm going to walk through the difference of them, and then I'll talk to them about talk a little bit about how I kind of define it, I guess, and how I use it. So assessment, and when I'm going to talk about assessment, I'm really more going to talk about staff assessment or self-assessment. So looking at yourself and reflecting on yourself, it's important for staff to do that, and it's important for management to do that as well. And this class involves a lot of reflection because I think it makes you grow as a director and a leader and a supervisor. But I think staff assessing themselves is really important as well to allow them to make goals for their work with the children. And then if your program supports professional development, which I think it should, that would be part of their goal setting as well. And through that assessment process, they would know what areas they are struggling in that they need professional development in order to be a stronger, more well-rounded teacher in the classroom. So when I'm talking about assessment, I'm usually talking about a self-assessment and staff assessment. When I'm talking about evaluations, I'm talking more about kind of the really specific work performance staff evaluations that everybody seems to know. So assessment, I think, would be a better word because you're looking at how you fulfill your essential job functions, but most places use evaluations. Like in January and December, in November and December, I was evaluated by Palomar College on my teaching methods. They asked the students how it was going, then I was observed, and then I had a specific job description evaluation where we went through all of the essential job functions of teaching at Palomar, and I was rated on that. And that also, as part-time, allows me to keep up with my job. So this is the word that most people know, and this is what we're going to be really working on this week is evaluation. So it's used to evaluate your work performance so that we can keep that quality and we can work towards our goals. So we use the ECRS in the classroom, and we typically use evaluations for our staff and our teachers. When I say staff, I mean all staff. So if you're lucky enough to have administrative staff, support staff, janitors, cooks, they should be evaluated as well with their specific job functions. So your job description is essential a job function. So it's the characteristics that your staff, your support staff, or your teachers show in their jobs. Like, so you have a job description. We will write one later on, but in 150 we already wrote some. We'll write some later on. It's taking those essential job functions and it is rating your staff based on that. Typically it's in person and it's through formal or informal observations. I think that you should have one formal observation. Of course, it's going to be based on a lot of different things, a year typically of the work that you were doing with somebody, but I think legally having a formal observation that someone in management or somebody with a mentorship role has done of that person is a better standing to have on, that you were looked at regularly and you were offered feedback on your job performance is really important. In some programs, I did them every 3 months, every 6 months, or every year. Younger staff got them every 3 months, more seasoned staff got them every 6 months, and I was lucky enough to have a larger management team where when I had 40 to 80 staff members, those observations were spread over 3 to 4 people, so it wasn't somebody, I mean, with 80 people, that would have been in my entire job. So in that position, every 3 months, I looked at our younger staff and our newer staff that was coming on board until they got to about year 1.5, 2. And then after that, it was every 6 months. So that was then became part of that file, and that became part of their evaluation at the end of the year. In that case, since it was such a large organization, it was actually the military system, those evaluations tied in with some possible raises as well, or kind of extra cash that we had coming our way was tied in with your evaluations. And that's a way that a lot of school districts do it as well. There's kind of steps that you can achieve. I think with evaluations as well, in addition to a formal or informal observation in the classroom, self-assessments are really good. So talking about the assessments from the previous slides, if there was questionnaires that they were working on, if there was goal planning or professional development that they had planned to do, did they actually do it? Did they go to that conference that they were supposed to? What have they implemented into the classroom? That would be always all things that you would be looking on. You can ask parents to fill out questionnaires. In my job with children with therapy right now, that is part of my evaluation, is an anonymous questionnaire goes to all of the families throughout the county that I work with, and then they send it back. It's not my only one, but it does give my program director, who is not able to travel to all of the families' homes, an idea of how I am doing out on my own, providing therapy in people's homes for children with special needs. So that is one way you can do it. That should not be the entire evaluation, because we've all worked with parents before. It's not a 100% reliable sense of how a teacher is. You can get, a real jerk for a parent who everything is going to be negative, and you're going to need to take a grain of salt. And that's often why they fill out questionnaires, but they're maybe not anonymous, so that you can kind of balance the parent and who they are with the kind of job assessment that they have done for you. So that's a tool that you can use, but it shouldn't ever be your entire way of evaluating staff. I do want to talk about kind of the bigger picture of why we are doing staff evaluations. It's because we want to have this effective workforce. So we're using the policies and procedures to effectively communicate staff duties. So your essential job functions of your job, how you're taking care of children, are then communicated to staff, and then we assess and evaluate staff so that their deficiencies are really identified. So what's your vulnerability? What do you need to work on? How can we target it? How can we make a plan of action for it through professional development? And then also, what are your strengths pointed out and supported? So the best kind of job evaluation does that. It talks about your strengths and vulnerabilities. It tells you the great things that you did, and then it gently points out the areas that you need to work on, and then maybe some goals that you can work on. So my staff evaluation, this policy, I've been talking a lot about job descriptions and essential job functions. Don't worry about that. This is just, like I said, a big overview policy, big picture. You're looking at the 3 W's and 1 H. So why? Your first paragraph should be, why is it important to be regularly and formally evaluating staff? Explain why we evaluate and why they are being evaluated. When? So when will you evaluate staff? I don't want to hear January or July. Once a year, twice a year, quarterly, monthly, weekly, hourly, whatever it is, it's your decision when you are going to evaluate your staff. Who, Who's going to evaluate who? Is it management evaluating classrooms, classrooms evaluating management, everybody evaluates each other? How is it going to be happening? And then how are you going to evaluate staff? Are you going to use formal observations, informal observations, talk with parents, self-assessment, that type of stuff? So what method are you using to evaluate your staff members? And then how are you going to communicate this assessment to the staff members? So you've done the formal assessment or informal evaluation. How are staff going to have that information communicated to them? Are they going to have a meeting? Are you going to have a formal evaluation process? Tell me all that kind of stuff. So that's your online assignment for this week. I do want to remind you that these policies are ultimately going into your operational file. So we are writing it on the ground, boots on the ground. We're writing it as we go along. And then in a couple of weeks, you'll turn it in a different format. So please use these assignments and then definitely the feedback that I give you to support your vision. So don't, even though if you're turning it in, you guys are doing really great. I mean, 9s, 10s, 8s, I haven't given anybody lower than an 8. You guys are like fantastic on that. So, but use the feedback, because even if you're getting a 10, I'm probably giving you things that you could work on, paragraphs that you could switch, edits in your file, so that you kind of have my feedback to help you make these policies stronger and stronger. It's supporting the work that you're doing now in the classroom or as a director, and then also in the future, if you were in the future to be using policies and procedures, then you have this on your desktop or in a file folder so you can bring it out later in the workplace where you might really need it. So save the resources if you like them, save the PDF. If somebody talks about something about workshops that they've gone to or tips or things like that, save those, write those down so that you can learn from it and take away from this class a body of work that's going to be really helpful for you. And that's just a reminder of kind of the vision, I guess, that I have for this class, is that you leave with something that's going to be really helpful for you, that you've grown and that you feel like you are a better director for it, or you're ready to take on that next step. Or if you're always going to be a teacher, you have a strong idea of why policies and procedures are important, which will serve you ultimately as a teacher, I believe, too. So in conclusion, a framework and a system for planning, organizational planning, is really going to help directors run an effective program so that you have these management skills that are really organized how they are supposed to be. Assessment and evaluation really support our program, and they support our ability to care for children, because that's the bottom line, is children are healthy, safe, and have been educated while they are with us. That's why we're doing this. That's why we plan. That's why we have organizational management. That's why we assess and evaluate. You're a director. You're supporting the staff so that they can support the children. And then the more we support staff, the more they support our program and they support us. Thanks so much. I'll see you guys next week. Oh, I'm sorry. Last thing to do this week. So write your staff assessment policy. Read. It's a selection from A Great Place to Work, talking about different types of questionnaires. We did that a couple weeks ago. A Great Place to Work. She had talking about leadership. But now I've got a little bit more from her. And then I used the second part of Chapter 5 from our textbook for support for some of this planning process and central concept and those types of areas. This week is going to be more a group project discussion board, so we're breaking down the assignment and looking at the what people can be doing, how things are going to, how are you going to choose. So on the platform that you've chosen, you can do this, but we're going to be looking at breaking down kind of the presentation and who can do what, who's more tech savvy, who knows PowerPoint, who doesn't know PowerPoint, things like that. My only caveat is it needs to be something that's supported by Canvas. So I do PowerPoints that are then uploaded onto YouTube because that is the easiest way, and that is what Canvas really supports. If you want to present another way, that's fantastic. That's not a PowerPoint or a YouTube video or a Zoom video. Please email me just so that I can double check that I'm going to be able to receive your presentation in whatever form it is and then upload it onto Canvas so that all of your fellow students can see it. So if you have if you're tech savvy, please reach out to me and tell me of a different way you want to do this. Otherwise, I've given you 2 ideas for ways that you can do the tech part of this presentation, and that's what you're going to be talking about, is that kind of presentation. All right, I'll see you guys next week.